Hello, historians. Welcome. This is the last set of notes, guided notes for this unit, which is early empires, and we're here talking about the Arab empires and the caliphates that came after Muhammad died. Okay, so let's get started. So in this particular unit, I want you to be able to determine the causes and effects and the extent of the Islamic military expansion and how that happened throughout Central Asia, Northern Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula. The Iberian Peninsula is essentially that portion of Spain and that part of the Strait of Gibraltar, okay? All right, so these are your vocabulary words. As you see here, we're going to use this often, so of course you know to make sure that you have those written down. You have caliphate, Shia, Sunni, and Vizier, okay? So we're going to talk more about those later. All right, so for your first question, the question here is talking about what happened after the death of Muhammad. So when Muhammad died, right? Muhammad, his successors were able to spread Islam throughout those areas that we talked about, the Iberian Peninsula. They were able to spread it through Northern Africa and parts of Central Africa, and also throughout the Arabian Peninsula and parts of India as well, okay? However, Muhammad did not name a successor after he died, and nor did he produce any instructions as to who should take his place afterwards, or told his followers, well, this is what you should do after I die, right? Also, Muhammad had several daughters. He had no sons. So, of course, in those traditions, it was a cultural practice that a male would be the next leader, right? So because of that, the Muslim community fell back to their customs to elect, to have their community elect their next leader, okay? And this is basically how it turned out. So that would be the answer for your number one, okay? All right, so because of that, there were several leaders that were selected, okay? And as you see here, the word caliph, a caliph is one of those rulers. So if you go back to your vocabulary, you will see that word again, okay? Were rightly guided was those caliphs or those leaders that came or succeeded after the death of Muhammad, okay? So Abu Bakr was a loyal friend of Muhammad, and he succeeded him after his death. And he was able, as you see here, to unify the Muslim world, suppress a lot of the political and religious uprisings, okay? Then you had Umar. Abu Bakr was the first caliph after Muhammad died. Umar was next, and then you have Uthman, and then Ali. Ali was Muhammad's son-in-law. So as you see here, because these were caliphs, right? Their rule or their empire is usually called a caliphate, okay? So that's what where the word caliphate comes in, okay? All right, so in your Edpuzzle, I would like for you to tell me, this is Abu Bakr, the first caliphate, but this is Caliph Uthman that came after. So did the empire, the Islamic empire, diminish, or did it expand? Tell me in your Edpuzzle, and I'll go over that in a minute. All right, so if you said that it expanded, you're correct, because if you see here by 634 CE or Common Era to 654 Common Era, it really definitely expanded throughout parts of Persia and also into Northern Africa, right? Under Uthman's caliphate, right? All right. And that can also answer your question for number 3, okay? You see the direction in which they expanded. They went southward and they also went to the east, right? In the Arab empires, or in these caliphates, right? As they were traveling and they were expanding the empire. Now realize that expansion of an empire does not entail necessarily being nice, okay? When they expanded their empire, they had their armies, right? So their armies were their warriors were fearsome, okay, and they were successful, okay. And one of the things that the Muslim soldiers were assured of, as you see here, is that they would be assured a place in paradise, right, in heaven, or what Christians would call heaven, but in their terminology would be paradise. If they died in battle, they were assured a place in paradise, okay? And that's kind of how they were motivated to really go into battle and really expand the empire, okay? Now, in a lot of the conquered territories, a lot of the Muslim administrators, they were very tolerant of the people that they conquered, okay? Sometimes they would allow them to even still govern themselves, okay? But of course they had stipulations in terms of having advisors and so forth, which we'll get into in a minute. They also allowed those people that they conquered, like Christians and Jews, to also practice their religion in that conquered territory. So Christians and Jews they didn't say, okay, well, you have to convert to Islam. They didn't say that. They just told them, okay, you're Christian and Jew, you can practice your religion, that's fine. Now, those that didn't choose to convert either to Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, they were required to be loyal to the Muslim rule, and then they also had to pay a special tax in order to still frequent that territory that was just conquered. Okay, so again, if that territory was conquered, they were tolerant. They would allow them to govern themselves at some point. Christians and Jews could practice their religion, but if they did not decide to convert to any of those 3 religions, they had to be loyal to that new Muslim rule and pay a tax. Okay, so that was 4 and 5. Question 4 and 5. All right, so this is under the Umayyad Dynasty, okay? And I'm gonna attempt to say this name. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But the Muawiyah, right? Muawiyah was governor of Syria and one of the caliph's chief rivals, okay? So Caliph Ali, who was the son-in-law of Muhammad, he became a caliph, right? And when under his domain, he was able to take quick control of the caliphate. And by doing this, he established the Umayyad Empire, the Umayyad Dynasty. And with that, he was able to move the capital city to Damascus. And remember, we discussed Damascus. Damascus is the capital city of Syria, okay? So that was the central area of the Umayyad Dynasty, okay? All right, so again, that would be 6 and 7 for question 6 and 7. All right, so in the Umayyad Dynasty, they went as far over to the Strait of Gibraltar, southern Spain, and they were able to conquer a certain area of Spain and make that a Muslim state or Muslim country, and they had their center area as Cordoba, okay? They were able to expand their empire so enormously, and because of that, they accumulated a lot of wealth, they accumulated a lot of power, and also they had new ethnic groups come into Islam, especially in Northern Africa. Okay, so the Northern African people started to come into Islam and bringing their knowledge and their culture into this Umayyad dynasty. All right. And as you see here, as I mentioned, this is the Umayyad dynasty as its greatest, and you see how far west it expanded. Of course, they were here in the east, in the peninsula here, in the Arabian Peninsula, but they went as far west as Portugal and Spain, right? All right, so under Hussein, who was the second son of Ali. Remember we talked about Ali, the Caliphate Ali, right? So under the second son of Ali, Hussein had this notion, or he figured that Muslims should only accept caliphates or caliphs that were the direct descendants of Ali, because they were the true leaders of Islam, because Ali was the second son-in-law of Muhammad. So in other words, he believed that Muslim caliphs should be the direct descendants of Muhammad. Okay, so if you follow along in that track, okay, whereas others believe that that shouldn't be the case, that, you know, Umayyad rule and they could have Umayyad caliphs. Okay, that this shouldn't be as restricted to having that descendants being from Muhammad. So because of that disagreement and that revolt, the literal revolt that happened, Islam split into two different groups. So you have the Shia. Shia believe that those descendants should be from Ali. And then you have the Sunni, which agrees that they figured that they should accept rulership from the Umayyad as caliphs. Okay, they said that it's fine, they don't have to be descendants. So that's where that split has happened, and it still is in existence today. Okay, the majority of the Muslim world are Sunni, whereas in Iraq and Iran, most of them are Shia. Okay, so that would be our answer for number 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so hopefully you get that. There was two different groups. One was they were split into Shia and Sunni. The Shia accepts descendants from Ali, which is a descendant of Muhammad, and then the Sunni, they accept caliphs from the Umayyad dynasty. It didn't matter if they were descendants of Muhammad or Ali. Okay, and most Muslims are Sunni. Okay, and as you see, this is the division of the Muslim world, and you see here most of them are Sunni. Only a few, those that are in Iraq and Iran, are Shia. Okay. In the Umayyad rule, because there was so much favoritism shown to certain Arabs, and then also because of that revolt that happened with the split, there was a lot of contention and favoritism and resentment and so forth. Also, there was a lot of corrupt behavior that was in the Umayyad dynasty, and that gave a way for the Seljuk Turks. So if you're wondering, Turkey, the country Turkey, and where that name comes from, it comes from these group of people, the Turks. Okay, so the Seljuk Turks then started what was called the Abbasid dynasty. Okay, and the Abbasid dynasty is the one that took control after the Umayyad dynasty, and they created their new capital city, which is your answer for number 15. Their capital city became Baghdad. Okay, and they try to break down this distinction between Arabs and non-Arab Muslims by allowing non-Arabs and Arabs to intermarry, and especially with conquered peoples. That could be anywhere from, as we said, Baghdad is in Iraq, Iran, Northern Africa, etc. Okay, so that's how they kind of broke down that resentment of who was non-Arab Muslims and who was Arabic Muslims. Because remember I mentioned before that Arabic Muslims was Semite. Okay, so there was a lot of favoritism and resentment there. Okay. And as you see here, this was the Abbasid dynasty as it grew after the Umayyad Dynasty. And as you see here, it went further down into northern Africa. All right. All right, this is Hanan AlRashid, and he was one of the caliphs under the Abbasid Caliphate, and he was known for his charity, and he also lavished and supported artists and writers under this caliphate. Okay, so art and architecture and so forth really grew under his empire or his caliphate. So again, with the Seljuk Turks or the Abbasid dynasty, they really changed the position of the caliph, and they made it a little bit more complex, where there was a council header called a vizier, and that vizier advised the caliph. So it's almost like having a prime minister to a president, or a vice president to a president. Okay, so a lot of what was given to the caliph, they would go to their vizier to get information from that vizier. Okay, and the last one, what caused the Abbasid dynasty to fall? Because once an empire rises, of course it's gonna fall. All right, so the Abbasid dynasty fell a bit because of all of the fighting over that same succession to the caliphate. So that same issue about who's supposed to rule, because remember before, Muhammad did not distinguish who was supposed to be in succession. So there's a lot of contention about who was supposed to be the ruler or take his position, right? Still. So that fighting over the succession of about who's supposed to rule in this caliphate was one of the issues. Of course, there was financial corruption. And then also, even though they had a strong, before the Umayyad dynasty and the other caliphates had strong armies, here there was a shortage of qualified Arabs for the army and civil service. So if they don't have a strong army, of course, they're not able to defend themselves. So the dynasty is going to decline. All right, and that is the end of the Islamic Empire and how it expanded and how it declined. Again, I would like for you to take a look and go back and answer the last question about how the religion really impacted the culture of Islam and even the Byzantine Empire in terms of Christianity. Why do you think it fell? What caused these empires to fall? Okay, I would love for you to answer that in the Edpuzzle at the end, and I will see you soon.